Namaskar, Shrikant Dada. Thank you for inviting me once again. I have a strange habit of sometimes throwing some words at people, and people catch those, and people catch me by them. So, in one of our groups, WhatsApp groups, I must have uttered the word yajna. So, somebody caught me by that word and then said, if you have uttered this word, then please tell us what it means. You see, the word yajna in Marathi, we pronounce that word, or we are used to pronouncing the word as yajna. In classical Sanskrit, they spell it as Y-A-J, yajna. That's how the pronunciation is. In Hindi, they will pronounce it as yagya, and in some other languages, they may also pronounce it as yagna. So, there is a different way in which even this word can be pronounced. What does it really mean? At one time, it used to mean a sacrificial offering. Okay, the entire process, the entire ritual could also be called yajna. There was a very elaborate ritual for performing a yajna. You see, how to live, how to do things, what is life all about, what kind of things should we be doing in this world, and why should we be doing those things in the world. All of these things have been discussed in great detail in what we call the Veda. Veda is essentially the knowledge that exists in this universe. This knowledge simply exists. Whether we know it completely or not, or how well do we know whatever we know, that is entirely up to each one of us. If we know certain things, then we can make use of that knowledge for whatever purpose we want to make use of that knowledge for. So, for example, the law of gravity or the fundamental principle of gravity has always existed. In today's age, we are told that Newton discovered the law of gravity and then he gave us certain formulas which are commonly known as Newton's laws. So there is, Newton's law of gravity, of course, and there are other laws Newton's has discovered and has written about and he has explained everybody about those laws. Those are laws of nature. Those are not Newton's laws. We call them Newton's laws because Newton discovered them. Newton did not create those laws, right? So, if we understand how things work, then we can make use of that knowledge or that understanding to make our life better, make our life more convenient, make our life easier so that we can achieve the desired objective, right? In Veda, there are elaborate rituals described and how these rituals should be performed. There was an age when the ritualistic worship of fire was called the yajna, and that was performed according to Vedic rules and regulations to achieve certain objectives. So, in our ancient books, we hear about something called the Ashwamedha Yajna. Ashwamedha Yajna is a king who wants to be the king of a large area would send a horse from his kingdom to various other kingdoms on whom he wants to establish his kingdom, his control, his administration. If somebody stops the horse, then this king who has the horse or who has sent the horse would go to war with that kingdom and then would win, of course, and then annex it in his kingdom. Okay. Usually, the king who would do such a yajna, of course, he would also do some ritual in his own kingdom, and then the horse would be ceremoniously sent to other places where the king wanted to establish his administration. Most of the kings around would accept this king's sovereignty and they would become a part of that king's kingdom. That's how these things are described. The accuracy or all the details of this are not really that important. I'm just trying to say how the manifestation of yajna has changed over the years or over ages. So there was this Ashwamedha yajna. There was another yajna that was called the Putra Kameshti yajna. So Putra Kameshti is done with a desire to have a child, a boy, a son. This kind of yajna was done by the king Dasharatha because he didn't have any children. So he was advised by his family priest or the family guru, family teacher, that a yajna of this kind would be useful, would be helpful for him to get progeny, which he does according to the instructions given in the Vedas. And he does have four sons. Okay, this is the story of Ramayana. So we know about such ritualistic sacrificial rituals or offerings, and these offerings are of various types of materials in a ritualistic fire and so on. That used to be the manifestation of yajna at one time. Then thereafter, as time changed, as society changed, as society evolved, different types of yajnas were performed. You see, when we undertake such a ritual, when we undertake any such activity with a certain desire at the end of it, a certain material desire at the end of it. So having a son or having kingdom, an expanded kingdom, having administrative control over a larger portion of land are all desires in this material world. Correct? So even for the achievement of material worldly desires, Veda would give us instructions. Okay. Veda will also give us instructions about going beyond it. Because if we look at the material world, the way we experience material world is essentially through our five senses and our mind. So whatever impressions are created through these five senses on our mind, to those sensations we call the world, right? The world creates an impression on our mind through sensations. We've tried to understand this in one of our previous webinars, how you are experiencing me right now. Let's forget about the word yagya, the forget about the word Veda, forget about knowledge of this universe, and forget about everything else. Let's start from our own experience of right now. Right now, you are experiencing that you are looking at me on your screen and you are listening to me through your ears. So, all that is happening is in your mind, three different impressions are getting created. One is the impression of sound that you are hearing, another impression is of the shape of my face on your screen, and the third impression is the colors within that space, within that shape. And to these three sensations, you are calling the experience of Vikram is talking to me. This is exactly what is happening right now. In the same manner, everything we experience in the world is actually experienced within us as impressions. Okay. And to those impressions, we call something. Okay. So, whatever we call that experience is our own superimposition on the experiences we get or the sensations we experience within us. And that name and form is called the Jagat or the world for us. Okay. So the world is experienced by us only in this manner. There is no other way we will experience the world. Okay. Another fundamental understanding is the experience I have is my unique experience. My unique experience. Okay. Nobody else has that experience. Nobody else has that experience. And whatever experience I have, only that experience I have. When we understand our relationship with the world, our experience of the world in this manner, then we start working on what this mind is, which is perceiving all these things. When we start working in this direction, when we start trying to learn about ourselves, that is when a spiritual seeker is born. And this spiritual seeker is basically undertaking a yajna or a yagya by offering on the sacrificial fire anything and everything worldly. Only when only when I completely offer any and all desires for any material acquisitions. Okay. When all of my material desires, all of my worldly desires are offered, sacrificed. This is of course virtual, it's not real. I mean, you are not creating a fire and you are not actually putting anything into the fire, any of those things. I'm coming from the material yajna to a more spiritual yajna because that is where we want to ultimately go. Okay. So I'm trying to explain to you how I have understood the meaning of the word yajna. Don't expect anything scholarly from me at all. Okay. I'm not a scholar. I don't even understand the Sanskrit language. Okay. Whatever I share with you is essentially my own contemplation on what I have heard and how it makes sense or how it is relevant today. Okay. If I understand the true teaching of the Vedas, the knowledge portion of the Vedas is called Vedanta or the end of the Vedas or whatever has come after the ritualistic portion of the Vedas. Vedas are a universal knowledge base for all kinds of people, right? So, whoever is interested in achieving material worldly desires, for them guidance is provided. Those people who are not so interested in that, who are wanting to go beyond that, for them also guidance is provided. To those who are wanting to know who they are, who are wanting to understand who they are, if I want to know who I am, who I truly am, then that guidance is given in Vedanta or in other words also Upanishad. Upanishad is basically a portion of the Vedas the knowledge portion of the Vedas. So whatever happens after we have undertaken a lot of worldly pursuits and we have come to a dead end in those pursuits, even after achieving what we want to achieve in the material world, the joy or the happiness that we derive out of those pursuits, even after achieving the desired results, doesn't really last forever. Okay. If we fulfill one material desire, one worldly desire, we may feel fulfilled from the point of view of that particular desire for a short time. But we will not feel completely fulfilled because there will be another desire we would want to pursue and we would want to fulfill. So, this virus of desire or kamana doesn't really leave us ever. Okay, so for some time after fulfilling a desire, it's like taking a medicine for the virus, and then for some time the symptoms of that virus go away and we feel good. Okay, but then the virus has not really been completely eliminated. Okay, so then that virus will again raise its head and then we will want to fulfill another desire. So that's how exactly how our life is run by all of us or most of us. But when we understand that fulfillment of desires doesn't really lead to fulfillment in life, that's when we start wondering about all of these things. And in the Gita, Krishna will very elaborately explain to Arjun what yajna is and all that, right? And then we get even more confused because we read in some books that yajna used to be, something like the Putra Kameshti or Ashwamedha, or to get any other material desires. Create a fire in the ground in a square shaped Agnikunda. In that Agnikunda, you have to start the fire in a certain manner. Then in that fire, you should add cow's ghee and you should add samidha and you should add this and you should add that. All those things, that's how we all imagine, or I used to imagine what yajna used to be. And then when I started understanding the subtler and subtler and subtler meanings of the word yajna, then I realized that, the external manifestation of the word yajna may change, but the spirit of that word is much more critical, much more important. And I should understand that spirit of the word. I should really understand the meaning of the word and how I can internalize it, how I can bring it down in my daily life. That's how I have done the contemplation on the word yajna. So in the Gita, one of the favorite verses, one of my favorite verses is यज्ञशिष्टाशिनः सन्तो मुच्यन्ते सर्वकिल्बिषैः भुञ्जते ते त्वघं पापा ये पचन्त्यात्मकारणात्. So this is in Sanskrit, and those who understand Sanskrit would understand the meaning of this verse. I don't understand Sanskrit very well. I have only memorized it, and I have understood the meaning of this verse the way I have read that in Marathi, English, Hindi, and so on. So what Krishna is trying to tell Arjun is whatever you obtain or whatever you acquire in this material world should be acquired after undertaking a proper sacrifice or a yajna. Okay, so whatever is obtained after performing a yajna, only that you should consume or only that you should acquire, and only that will eradicate all the sins from your life. That's what Krishna has told Arjun. Okay, but those who don't do that, then they are only consuming sin and they will have to pay for it in the future. That's what this whole verse means. The way I have understood this is if we obtain something, if we consume something without having worked for it, without having put in an honest effort to obtain that, then that should not be consumed. Okay. How does that relate to my daily life now? So if I am doing a job, if I'm working in some company or for the government or whoever, or for even myself, if I work for myself, then I have to be sincere towards my clients, towards whoever I'm serving, who is paying me. Okay. So if I put in my 100%, if I provide the best possible service for the money I'm getting in return, money or whatever I'm getting in return. Okay. So if I'm working for a company or working for the government, I get my salary at the end of the month, right? So for getting that salary, I should have put in 100% sincere effort. I should have done my best. Only then, when I take that salary from the government or from the company where I'm working, will become a cause for progress. Okay. Not just material progress, but spiritual progress. It will eradicate all of my sins. Only when I undertake every activity in this manner, you see, whenever we get something in exchange of something, whatever we get in exchange is usually of a slightly lesser value than what we put in. That's how it always happens, isn't it? So, for example, even if I am nailing a nail to the wall in the wood, see, I have a certain force in my hand. That force is getting transferred to the hammer, and then that is getting transferred to the nail. So, the objective is the nail has to be nailed to the wall, right? And I'm using a force from my hand through the hammer to the nail. But the force that actually goes to the nail is slightly less than what I'm giving through my hand, isn't it? So, whatever I put in as an effort, the result of that effort is always slightly less than that. That is exactly how it is. Another example is when we go to the grocery store to buy, say, mangoes, because currently mangoes are in season and I love mangoes. So, that's a good example, right? So, if I'm paying 7.99 for a box of mangoes, I usually buy a box of mangoes from Sam's Club, 7.99 per box, right? Do you think that the value of that box of mangoes is actually 7.99? No. Sam's Club has actually got that box of mangoes from wherever for less than that, isn't it? So the actual value of the mangoes is less than what I'm paying for it. So usually we always end up putting in more effort for getting a slightly lesser return. That's just how it is. Okay. When the reverse happens, then we say, I have won a jackpot or I have won a lottery. The effort I have put into the whole process is less than what I'm getting in return. Then that would be a lottery, isn't it? What Krishna is trying to tell Arjun is when you put in sincere effort into whatever you are doing, as I said in today's context, whether I am doing a job or whether I am providing a service to somebody, as long as I provide much better service than expected, either by my company or by the government or by my client, then and only then am I actually performing a yajna. And then when I get something in return of that effort, that would be called yajna shishta. Yajna shishta ashina santo Muchante sarva kilbishay. Muchante sarva kilbishay means all the sins will be eradicated. Bhunjate te tvagam papa, I will be enjoying only sin. Ye pachantyatma karanat. So if I undertake an activity for selfish desire, meaning what? I will put in less effort, but I will want more in return. Or whatever effort I am putting in, I want to only obtain the result for my own selfish gain, self aggrandizement, selfish desire, as opposed to whatever may happen to anybody else or the environment or other species, I don't even care. That would be consuming pap or sin. That's what Bhagwan is trying to explain here, right? If my everyday activity is undertaken with the attitude I just explained to you, that I'm going to put in more effort than expected, I'm going to put in sincere effort, and only then am I going to get anything in return. If all of my earning fits, falls into this category, only then will I be living the right kind of life. If I live my life in the opposite manner, so I put in less effort and I get more returns, it will not be good. Even after I get whatever I get in return of whatever efforts I have put in, even out of that, I should actually consume what I need at any given time. If I consume, even though I have earned everything what I have earned, I have everything available, even then, if I consume out of that more than what I need, I would still have incurred a papa or a sin towards my own body. Okay? If I consume more than this body requires, then it is not going to be good for the body. This is one of the fundamental principles in yoga practice. Okay? So there is a principle of aparigraha, not collecting things more than necessary. There is also a principle of pratyahara, not consuming anything more than necessary. How much is necessary? Each one of us has to find that point, and each one of us has to live according to that point. My most favorite example is always food. So how much food should I consume? I should consume only as much food as I require at any given time. Okay. How is that decided? That is decided according to my hunger level, isn't it? So if I consume only as much as my body requires for its daily maintenance, then my body, my mind, and my life will run quite smoothly. Okay. If I don't do that, then the desire to acquire more, acquire more, acquire more is fueled. It has been my experience, if we control our tongue in terms of how much we would consume, how much we would eat, number one, and also how much we would speak. I'm still learning the second one. I'm far from perfect in terms of how much to speak. Sometimes I will say more things than are necessary. And of course, if those extra words or improper words hurt someone, then I would apologize to them, saying, of course, those words were not intentional and were not intended to hurt that person at all. But still, it may happen unknowingly sometimes. Then what can I do? All I can do is, you know, go to them with the utmost humility I can muster and sincerity, of course, and apologize, isn't it? So When we live in this manner, our entire life becomes like a yajna. The ultimate yajna would be to sacrifice, to offer, and to completely burn away my sense of ego, my sense of separateness, my sense of ahamkara. This ahamkara, which makes me think, makes me believe, makes me behave as if I am a separate entity, separate from you, separate from this world, that ahamkara, that ego is essentially the root cause of all of my sorrow in this life. If I understand this and if I can sacrifice that, how do I do that? I live according to the principles I have learned. In one of our previous webinars, we have talked about the eightfold path of yoga, in which the first two angas or the first two steps are essentially how we should live in this world, how we should conduct ourselves. If we can follow those principles, live our life in such a way that we consume only those things that are necessary for maintaining ourselves in a reasonable manner, there is nothing wrong with earning money. There is nothing wrong with earning a lot of money. What is wrong is a sense of attachment, a sense of craving, and a sense of ownership on that money, right? So we may earn as much money as we feel like, but out of that money, only consume those things that are necessary for us to maintain our life comfortably, not necessarily luxuriously, and utilize the remaining resources we have, financial, physical, mental, intellectual, to be able to help whoever is around us, whoever comes in contact with us, in whatever way we can. It's not compulsory that we help everybody who comes asking for help, because we may or may not be in a position to help. But whatever help we are able to provide, we should provide. If we live in this manner, make this a lifestyle, make this a thought process, then eventually doing this and living in this manner will become sahaj, effortless. That is the ultimate yajna. In that yajna, my sense of separateness, my sense of identity, my sense of ahamkara is sacrificed and is completely destroyed. That's when I realize that my essential nature is the same as the ultimate truth. That has been my contemplation on yajna. I've spoken for just over half an hour. So I'm going to stop here and I'm going to request you to raise your hand or unmute yourself one at a time, of course. And if you want to contemplate with me or if you want to say something, even if it happens to be different from or even against what I have just now said, I would be delighted if you could share your thoughts. Thank you. Shrikant.
Yeah, one question. How is this yajna different from tapas of one of the niyamas?
Great. In fact, I was actually expecting this question. I was even thinking that I would talk about it even unprompted, but I had decided I was going to speak for not really more than half an hour, because usually what happens is I end up speaking for a long time and there aren't enough questions or there isn't enough time for questions. So 2 or 3 times it so happened that I could not take all the questions. So I thought I would stop in about half an hour and then we can just contemplate together. So yajna is basically a sacrificial offering, right? If we keep doing this consistently throughout, that would be tapa. The way I understand tapa is we undertake a practice, even if that practice may be difficult for me. If I continue doing that, if I continue stretching the limits of my body and my mind, that is called tapa. So, forcing our body and mind to do things that the body and mind may not be interested in doing or may not be used to doing. So, stretching that limit is tapa. So, when we are living our life in the spirit of yajna, if we can continue to live in that awareness at all times, that would be tapa from my point of view in response to what you just asked.
Okay.
Okay. So, tapa is consistency in our practice, regardless of the bodily or mental situation.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
Great. Any other comments or questions anybody has? If you wish to unmute yourself, then you can unmute yourself.
May I say
If
something?
yeah, go ahead. Anagatai,
हा. फारच तुम्ही सुंदर सांगितलं. आय नेव्हर थॉट ऑफ यज्ञ फ्रॉम दिस पर्स्पेक्टिव्ह. एक्सलंट. विच कॅन
thank you.
इज फॅन्टॅस्टिक. मला तपाबद्दल विचारायचं. पीपल कॅन हॅव दिस तपा विथ अ wrong motivation. You with your mind and a body, and you deny yourself everything for an evil purpose, right? So how
Correct.
do they go your yajna and tapa? How do they get
Exactly.
motivated?
That's a great question. And you see, this understanding of yajna and tapa will keep changing as we ourselves evolve from within. Right? So initially, you see, we have done quite a bit of yajna and tapa as in our young age. We have worked hard. We are all, whoever is here on this call, most of us are materially fairly well off. It's not that we have any material difficulties, right? So we have worked hard, and I don't think any of us
Mhm.
in this call has been a recipient of a lottery yet. If they have, great. I mean, I'm happy for you, but most of us have come to this stage in our life through hard work, which is basically yajna, and doing it consistently is tapa, right? If we utilize whatever we have obtained in return, bhunjate te tvagam papa ye pajantyatma karanat. So if we utilize whatever we have achieved or whatever we have received in return of our or return for our efforts, which is yajna and tapa,
Mhm.
if we use that only for our selfish purposes,
Mhm.
self-aggrandizement, or wasting that or spending that on undue luxuries,
Mhm. Mhm.
or trying to build a brand or a name or a fame, you know either way it would be not conducive to my progress in the spiritual direction.
Mhm.
If I continue to do that, then I would be going away from myself, and then I would be asura. If I use this affluence I have in terms of material wealth as well as a reasonable standing in the society towards moving in the direction of the self, trying to find who I am and not keep pursuing worldly desires, then I would be moving in the direction of Sura. Okay,
Yeah, agree.
agreed?
Yeah, yeah. The question is, tapa can be asura too.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, that is exactly what the tapa of Ravana was,
Mm.
Hiranyakashipu was. isn't it? See, these people have done the tapa because they have tried to embellish, strengthen, aggrandize their sense of limited identity.
Mhm.
So, whenever we undertake any activity to embellish that sense of limited identity, ahamkara, any and all of that tapa will be called asuri tapa,
It's wasted.
right?
Mhm.
But if I undertake a tapa
Mhm.
to eliminate my sense of otherness, eliminate my sense of ahamkara, as I said at the very end, the ultimate tapa, the ultimate yajna
Mhm.
would be to sacrifice my own sense of identity,
Mhm.
my own sense of separateness, right? Now, we are talking about this yajna and tapa purely from the perspective of I am doing the tapa and I am doing the yajna, right? So there
Mhm.
is a doer still involved, isn't it? Ultimately, that sense of doership
Yeah.
has to be eliminated. Okay, so that would be the ultimate yajna.
Mm.
That would be the ultimate tapa. So my entire life's activity should be considered as a tapa of moving from a sense of limited identity
Mm. Yes. Mm.
to understanding my essential nature as limitless without any identity at all, infinite, always existing and blissful. Sat, Chit, and Anand.
Mm. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you for asking such a beautiful question, and I'm glad I was able to contemplate on this with you. Anybody else has any comment or question on this? The one yajna I wanted to talk about, and I deliberately did not talk about it because I spoke for almost half an hour, is the yajna we talk about when we say the prayer before we eat, isn't it? What
you.
do we say? वदनी कवळ घेता नाम घ्या श्री हरीचे सहज हवन होते नाम घेता फुकाचे जीवन करी जीवित्वा अन्न हे पूर्ण ब्रह्म उदर भरण नो हे जाणीजे यज्ञ कर्म, right? So what is this yajna karma? This yajna karma is essentially putting the food in our Jatharagni. That Jatharagni is the actual yajna. Okay, that's the sacrificial fire in which food is being offered as the ahuti. Okay, when should I put any ahuti in a yajna? Only when there is a fire in that yajna. Otherwise, if I put some ahuti in that yajna, then the fire will be extinguished, isn't it? When we put anything into our belly, when the belly is not asking for it, unless there is a sensation of hunger, true hunger, if I add anything to this Jatharagni, the fire in my belly, then it will not be yajna. It will be bhunjate te tvagam papa ye pachanti atmakaranat. Okay, because I want to consume something, I want to eat something, even though I don't really need it, because I'm not hungry yet, right? Then, if I consume something, that would be the second line of that verse. But if I have worked hard all day long, I have consumed what I wanted to before beginning my work, and then I worked all day long, and I have now digested everything I have eaten in the morning, and now I'm hungry again to have another meal in the evening or in the afternoon, wherever, right? When I consume my meal only in this fashion, when I consume my meals more than one meal, it doesn't really matter how many meals I eat every day. Okay. If you listen to Dr. Jagannath Dikshit, the famous doctor from Maharashtra, who is on a mission to tell everybody that if you want to reverse diabetes, then you should eat no more than twice a day. Okay. He will also tell you that you should eat those two meals only when hungry. You should not be eating two meals just because he has told you so. He has also told us that, you should finish your meal within a 55-minute window. It doesn't mean that we should keep eating for 55 minutes. He gives us that disclaimer every time. So therefore, the process of eating will become a yajna karma only when there is a digestive fire already lit up, and in that fire I am only adding as much fuel as necessary to maintain the body. Okay, so I may not necessarily understand how much quantity of food I may put into my belly at any given time. I may enjoy what I am eating and I may overeat a bit. Doesn't really matter. Okay, if we do that, then it will take us a bit longer to digest the food we have eaten, isn't it? Then just wait. So between meals, I must fast until I get hungry again. This is called intermittent fasting. This should be done during the day and overnight as well. So if I get hungry 3 times a day, truly hungry, I may eat thrice a day. If I get hungry only twice a day, I should only eat twice a day. If on a certain day I get hungry only once a day, that's the only meal I should have. I should not really have another meal on that day, right? So if we undertake this kind of intermittent fast between our meals consistently, Shrikandada, that would be tapa. Okay. So if we can continue this kind of tapa forever, then we will get the kind of yogic siddhis and powers like Durvas Muni, right? So Durvas Muni used to have this kind of upavas at all times. Right? I probably told you the story of how Durvas Muni had eaten a big meal, and then he told the gopikas who had fed him when they wanted to cross the Yamuna, he told them the mantra. Tell Yamuna, if Durvas Muni has always remained in upavas after having had a fulfilling dinner, then the Yamuna flood would go down and then these girls could walk back home. That's how it is. So if I consume only what I need, only when I need, only to the extent I need, then I'm always in upavas. So this principle, this logic can be extended to everything we consume in our life. See, our needs are rather limited. Our needs are based on our physical capacity, right? Even if the world's greatest food is available in front of me, unlimited, I can only eat as much as my body can accept at any given time. If I consume more than that, then I'll get sick. That's obvious, isn't it? So when I consistently consume only as much as I need throughout my life, I'm not a yogi in that sense of the word. I have not been a tapasvi like this at all. I've been trying to consciously do this only in the past 3 or 4 years. Okay, before that, I used to eat to my heart's delight, heart's content. And then, of course, nature gave me the warning that, okay, your weight is 80 kilograms, 176 pounds. Your cholesterol is going beyond 200. Your blood sugar after your meals is going beyond 150. Hmm? So, all of these things are happening to you. So, beware, right? So, when I looked at that observation as a learning experience and I said, okay, what do I do to reverse this? And then I went back to the rules I've just told you. Eat only when hungry, consume only as much as you need, which is indicated by the first burp. So if I'm really hungry, if I sit down to eat and if I have a quiet meal, chew the food well, in about 15 to 20 minutes, I'll get the first burp. We should stop. That is when the stomach has been filled up by food to half its capacity. And then that stomach was completely full of air. That air was compressed to 50% of its original volume. And therefore, the pressure will get released through a burp. It's that simple. So if we can observe these two signals, number one signal, the green signal is I'm hungry. Number two, the red signal is I'm burping. then stop. If I run my life in this manner consistently, then I will be performing yajna karma. If not, I will be performing bhoga karma. Udara bharana no he janije bhoga karma. That is exactly how we run our life, isn't it? If we want to make the process of feeding this body into a yajna karma, that is exactly what we will need to do. Make sure that the fire is already lit. Only add as much fuel as the fire can easily burn. Then what will happen? The entire amount of fuel will be burned into energy, and that food will get very nicely converted into rasa rakta mamsa meda asti majja shukra, and then finally ojas, and that ojas will be unmistakable. There will be a glow on your face, on your body, in your personality, and other people will notice it. You will, of course, feel very good from within. About that, there is no doubt. But such contemplation, as we are doing right now, will simply start happening. I have said this previously also on this forum, that whatever I say here is something I'm prompted from within to speak rather than me speaking. I'm simply sharing my experience without any expectation. You will agree with it, you will like it, you will appreciate it. If you feel what I'm sharing with you makes sense, you're welcome to contemplate on that, question it, experiment with it. Don't believe at all. Do only those things that make sense to you. When you have first hand experience, then no belief is necessary, isn't it? Because you will have experienced it. If this can happen because of these sessions we do on contemplation of some of these concepts, that will be a great outcome, isn't it? So, any other points or questions you may have? If you wish to unmute yourself and then ask Anagatai.
One thing I wanted to mention, again, this is just, I never get a burp. Doesn't matter how much I eat.
Is that right? Wow. Observe it. I'm sure. Then, in that case, what I would suggest, Rikandada, is wait until you get really hungry. You will get
Yeah,
a
yeah,
dry
that
burp.
I do. That I do. That I don't
Do
eat.
you get a dry burp when you're hungry?
What do you mean?
Don't you get a dry burp? Dry burp means when you're hungry, even then you will burp.
I don't.
You don't get dry burp at all?
I'll observe it. Try to observe it.
Observe it. You should get a dry burp. At least when you are really hungry, you should get a dry burp. And that dry burp will have no odor or anything, right? But when you have eaten food and when you have, especially when you have undigested food. So, for example, if you have eaten a relatively large dinner and you haven't completely digested it, and then you get up in the morning you may get a burp, and that burp from within you will smell it of whatever you have eaten in the past. Okay. But if you have completely digested your food, then even when you get the burp, then that burp will not have any smell. See, burp will happen in this manner. I'll tell you. Our stomach is like a balloon, it's flexible. Okay. So when we eat our food, it will expand, right? And once we stop eating, then it will start churning. Ideally, we should fill up our stomach only 50% with food, right? And the rest of the space should be left open for digestive juices, the enzymes, and so on, and some amount of air or space so that everything will get mixed properly, right? Then, when we digest this whole batch, then the stomach will again contract, isn't it? If we keep expanding our stomach and keep it expanded all the time by adding food to it before the previous batch has been completely eliminated, then the elasticity of that sac is reduced to some extent. Okay. But this elasticity can be restored It's not that the elasticity will not be restored. It will be restored. It will be restored when we do upvas. So when we do upvas, then the elasticity of that flexible balloon is restored, and then you will and you should experience burp. It will not be offensive, but it will be within you, even a slight burp. I'm sure you try to observe burp. We should observe. Otherwise, I hope this is not the case where the stomach is permanently expanded and it is not even contracting. It should contract every day. Only then, we know that the stomach is working well. See, in fact, what happens is, Shrikandada, if this process doesn't happen well, then the food we consume doesn't get completely excuse me, and efficiently converted into the rasa rakta mamsa med and all that, and then some metabolic residues will be left over, which will be the equivalent of ash. So if we add a fuel into the fire which has a lot of ash, like coal for example, so coal will leave some ash into the burner, isn't it, or into the shegdi. So if such metabolic ash is left over, then that ash can manifest itself in disease. That is the root cause of all kinds of lifestyle diseases. Ayurvedic Vaidya will tell you that Agni Mandya. Agni Mandya, why will Agni Mandya happen? Because we have put more fuel onto the fire, sacrificial fire. That is why. So we have to give enough time for our body to digest the food we have eaten. I'm not saying that you're doing that, but this is something we all have to observe and inculcate in our own life, implement in our own life. There is no reason for me to judge anybody else here. Okay, don't take any of my comments as if I'm passing a judgment on all of you tamasic people eating all the time and all that. Not like that, much less, absolutely not. Okay, I'm just sharing with you the experience I have gone through and what I have learned through my experience. So hopefully this makes sense to you. Observe that, do skip a meal if you are able to. If you are not compelled to eat because you have to eat some medicine or whatever, try to skip a meal. See what happens. See, if we skip a meal, nothing bad will happen. During that time, the body is not going to stop eating. The body will fulfill its energy requirements. I'm hungry means what? My body requires some energy. If I don't give external energy, then the body will go in and try to pull energy from crevices in my body. So the first thing the body will eat is glycogen from the liver. When that is gone, then it will go and try to eat the fat wherever it has been stored. So that's how fat is burned, not through exercise. Fat is burned only through upvas. About that, there is absolutely no doubt. I've been doing yoga for 45 years. And because I was gaining weight, I also went to the gym for 5 years. In those 5 years, I became stronger. My weight kept on increasing because there was no control on the amount of food I was consuming. So to make sure that we remain the way we are supposed to according to the laws of nature, absolutely never ever consume anything more than necessary. And whatever contemplation I have done on the concept of yajna today is based on this fundamental discipline of not eating unless hungry. And I've done this consistently for 3 years at least. So I've not done the tapa. See, tapa also means 12 years. Okay. The word tapa means 12 years, a window of 12 years. So if you do a discipline for 12 years, then that is called a tapa. So I'm only a quarter of way through it right now. Even then, in this journey, I have experienced such wonderful things. Cannot even begin to tell you. It has been a phenomenal journey. So I'm delighted you all have the patience to listen to all this and you keep inviting me. So I must be doing something right. So I appreciate spending an entire hour of your Sunday afternoon with me. Thank you very much. Thank you, Shrikant Dada, once again for inviting me. We'll meet once again soon. All right. Have a wonderful evening, everybody.
Thank you, Vikram. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Good night.